Muy buenas tardes.
Parece que no quiere intervenir el presidente de la Fundación. O sea que si quieres me das la palabra a mí y ya está. ¿Cómo?
¿Pasa aquí?
Tú primero y yo después. ¿Vale?
Buenas tardes, buenas tardes. Buenas tardes. Es un gran honor y un gran placer tenerles ustedes esta tarde con nosotros. Algunos de ustedes se preguntarán qué hace el Museo del Prado metido en la neurociencia. Pero yo creo que como son ustedes inteligentes, pensarán sin duda que todo el proceso de la belleza en la mente es algo que hay que estudiar. Y si no sabemos todavía qué es lo que pasa, pues yo creo que desde este museo, que no solamente pasan por aquí miles de personas todos los años, pero también hay un sostén que tiene que ver con la belleza y con el concepto de belleza. Y me parece que es muy propicio que en este momento tengamos este debate con un insigne investigador, un profesor de la Universidad de Berkeley, un doctor por la Universidad de Harvard, que tiene mucho que decirnos sobre este tema. Esta mañana, como saben ustedes, el Museo del Prado, 10 minutos antes de abrir las puertas, por una web que conocen ustedes bien, que se llama Instagram, se enseña un cuadro del museo o se hace una reflexión sobre el museo durante 10 minutos. Y esta mañana me encontré yo también con la sorpresa de que la doctora que estaba, porque está por aquí seguramente, que ha hablado también, era una neurocientífica y ha hecho una presentación maravillosa de lo que es la belleza. Si no lo han visto, vuelvan ustedes a Instagram esta mañana hasta a las 10 menos 10 y verán una bellísima presentación de qué es la belleza desde la perspectiva de un neurocientífico. Bueno, hoy vamos a hablar de eso. El Museo del Prado, como he dicho, es más que un museo y es una institución de las más importantes de España, a mi juicio, y que tiene ese sentido de tratar de acompasar todas las cosas, mirar todas las cosas. Y hemos tomado la decisión con la Fundación Tatiana de darle un espacio para reflexionar sobre la neurociencia, la belleza, etc. Y aquí estamos, es la primera, y seguiremos haciéndolo. Presidente de la Fundación Tatiana, ¿quieres decir unas palabras? Si no quieres, o quieres tú, pues venga. Bienvenidos a todos, va a ser un placer enorme.
Muchísimas gracias, querido presidente del Patronato, don Javier Solana, y sobre todo por esta oportunidad que nos da la Fundación Tatiana para agradecer la colaboración que estamos teniendo en este campo tan innovador como es la neurociencia y el arte, con un proyecto que hacemos a través del Centro Internacional de Neurociencia y Ética, un centro que la Fundación Tatiana ha creado precisamente para estimular la investigación interdisciplinar sobre el cerebro y el cerebro en su contexto real, en el contexto de la persona, no solo en el laboratorio, y que junto a toda la investigación que financiamos en ese aspecto, pues queríamos también poner nuestro granito de arena. Y para ello, pues nadie mejor que el Museo del Prado, que siempre está abierto a la innovación, a abrirse, como decía su presidente del patronato, pues a todas las realidades del mundo. Y cuando les planteamos esta posibilidad, pues hemos tenido una acogida entusiasta de hacer un programa de residencia de una persona experta en la neurociencia, desde el punto de vista de la neurofilosofía o la neurociencia biológica, para que esté aquí en el Museo del Prado, para que pueda abordar pues esas cuestiones de la estética, de la experiencia creativa, de la belleza, de la historia del arte desde el punto de vista neurocientífico. Nuestro primer invitado de este programa del Museo y la Fundación pues es el conferenciante de hoy, que no me toca a mí presentarle, pero ya verán ustedes que es una personalidad que reúne en sí mismo precisamente este carácter interdisciplinar. Él es filósofo de formación, decano de filosofía de la Universidad de Berkeley y además ha dirigido ahí el Instituto de Ciencias Cognitivas, que ha estudiado precisamente estas relaciones con el cerebro y que es, esperemos, el primero de una serie de neurocientíficos que vengan aquí al museo. Hoy hemos tenido también con él un seminario con 20 neurocientíficos que hemos estado toda la mañana dialogando sobre estos temas y aportando pues esta visión interdisciplinar. Así que muchísimas gracias también a ustedes por su asistencia a esta conferencia y sobre todo gracias al Museo del Prado, a su presidente de su patronato, al director y a todos los profesionales que nos han ayudado y que están colaborando en esta iniciativa que pensamos que es pionera y como siempre con esa excelencia que nos da trabajar con el Museo del Prado. Así que nada más, muchísimas gracias a todos.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Javier Arnaldo, tengo a cargo el centro de estudios de este museo que bueno, se ha dedicado en parte, ¿no?, en colaboración con otros departamentos a la organización de este evento. Y permítanme sumar mis palabras de agradecimiento a las del presidente del Real Patronato y a las del director de la Fundación, Tatiana, y con igual intención también de bienvenida a la cita de hoy, bienvenida que también hago extensiva a todos los que nos siguen en remoto a través del canal de YouTube que se ha habilitado para la transmisión de esta conferencia. Vamos a asistir, como bien sabemos todos, a la conferencia de Alva Noë, el primer invitado, como bien hemos escuchado, a la residencia de Neurociencia y Arte que han creado en colaboración el Museo Nacional del Prado y el Centro Internacional de Neurociencia y Ética de la Fundación Tatiana. Es una iniciativa de particular relevancia para la búsqueda de interlocución de las colecciones y de las inquietudes por el saber del Museo Nacional del Prado, con saberes que van bastante más allá de la historia del arte y que quieren dialogar igualmente con el saber científico y técnico y particularmente con esas ciencias hoy más desarrolladas o más en boga o que consideramos más punteras, como es el caso evidentemente de la neurociencia. Es algo que también nos coloca en la interdisciplinaridad del conocimiento artístico como reto de conocimiento del museo, y esto gracias al apoyo de la Fundación Tatiana. La imagen en el arte y en la inteligencia artificial es el título que escucharemos, de la conferencia que escucharemos del profesor Alva Noë, profesor de la Universidad de Berkeley y autor de libros de tanta notoriedad como uno de 2009, titulado Out of Our Heads, o el de 2015, también muy extendido, Strange Tools, Art and Human Nature. En estos y en otros títulos, el profesor Noë se ocupa muy insistentemente en la relación mente, digamos, en el carácter central, ¿no?, que podemos observar de la actividad artística humana, de la actividad artística, digámoslo así, y digamos, la modelación de la mente. El profesor Noë es miembro del Instituto de Ciencias Cognitivas y Cerebrales y se presenta a sí mismo con todo como filósofo de la mente. Su tarea se subtrae un tanto a la neurociencia propiamente dicha, pero en la jornada que hemos escuchado, que ha tenido lugar esta mañana y que él ha presidido, esta jornada científica que ha reunido expertos de todos los puntos cardinales de la geografía nacional y de también otros puntos de fuera de España y con perfiles profesionales que iban desde de los estudios fisiológicos a la ingeniería de inteligencia artificial, pero con un perfil común de neurociencia. Nos ha mostrado la riqueza de ese debate, su centralidad en la discusión científica de hoy y cómo se insertan los saberes del profesor Noë en este campo. Dice filósofo de la mente y no dice filósofo del conocimiento, del conocimiento, epistemólogo, filósofo de la mente. Y efectivamente podemos contrastar esa disposición con las de filósofos. Pienso, por ejemplo, en Kant, que perfectamente se le llamaba, ¿no?, psicólogo en su momento, o alguien que penetra verdaderamente en el conocimiento de la mente humana. Y él no estaba, por entonces, así en esa disposición. Y claro, hay un factor muy determinante que hemos visto en la jornada de hoy, que es precisamente el conocimiento, digamos, el acercamiento filosófico al conocimiento, pero desde la plasticidad de la mente y, por lo tanto, desde su condición biológica, centralmente biológica. Esta es la maravilla, así que nos abre el discurso de la neurociencia y el discurso también de esta filosofía de la mente que encarna el profesor Noë, a quien quiero dar también las gracias y la bienvenida.
Well, thank you indeed for being here. There's a lot of you, and I'm deeply gratified to see so many of you. I'm very grateful to be here. I've had the opportunity to spend 2 weeks already here in the museum, being very well taken care of and also, I would say, instructed by the members of this museum. And I'm grateful to the Prado, I'm grateful to the Tatiana Foundation for supporting this visit as well. What could ever lead us to take seriously the idea that computers, these products of our own invention, might actually understand and think and feel, and that if not now, then maybe later, they might come to open their artificial eyes, thus finally to behold a shiny world of their very own? What might lead us to think that large language models, which are, finally, bits of engineering, not subjects, not individuals, can join us and participate in that part of our lives we call art? You don't need to deny the extraordinary, indeed potentially transformative power, and maybe also immense dangers, as well as opportunities, of this new technology, to reject the, I think, absurd suggestion that such machinery might come to have mind, let alone the idea, equally disturbed, I think, that we are ourselves, in fact, such machines, different only in that we are the result of biological evolution rather than its technological counterpart. The AI fantasy has many sources. I will now mention 2. Some thinkers have been impressed by the thought that the idea that living beings are special, somehow set apart from physics and technology, is an outmoded relic of a sentimental anthropomorphism. These thinkers are struck by the idea that, now unleashed, AI is beyond our control, fast, microscopic, distributed, and astronomically complex. This technology seems to have transcended us and come to have power of us. It's a new kind of artificial real agency in the world. But this power of technology is nothing new. The story of technology, its history, from prehistory until now, has always been that of the ways we are entrained by, that is to say, governed by, tools and systems of our own devising. Think of the pathways we lay down in walking. To every tool, there is a corresponding habit, that is, an automatized way of acting and being. From the pencil to the printing press to the internet, our human agency is enacted in part by the creation of social and technological landscapes that in turn transform what we can do and so seem to threaten to govern or to control us. So I think it is one thing to appreciate the ways we make and remake ourselves through cultural transformation of our worlds via tool use and technology, and another to mystify dumb matter put to work by us. If there's intelligence in the vicinity of pencils, the internet, cigarette lighters, maps, or calculators, it's the intelligence of their users and their makers. The digital is no different. But there is another origin of our impulse to concede mind to devices of our own invention, and I think this is more widespread. This is the tendency of many scientists to take for granted what I think of as an overly simplistic picture of animal cognitive life. They rely on a conception of human activity and cognitive accomplishment, according to which, roughly, to speak a language, or to play a game, or to make art, is to master a system of rules, to embody norms about how to go on. And in fact, what I think, and this is, I'm going to come back to this at the end, what I want to offer you tonight is distinctive of human life and performance is that norms, rules, systems, patterns, all of these are problems for us. We struggle to conform to them, even as we also find ourselves resisting them, and in resisting them, transforming them, our society, and ourselves. What many scientists in the AI research field, but also I think many neuroscientists and cognitive scientists seem to have forgotten, at least in some context, is that the human animal is a creature of distinct. 20th century philosopher of biology, Hans Jonas, put it like this: irritability is the germ, the atom of having a world. With us, there is, so to speak, always a pebble in the shoe. And this is what moves us, turns us, orients us to reorient ourselves, things differently so that we might carry on. It is irritation and disorientation that is the source of our concern. In the absence of disturbance, in the absence of concern, there is nothing. No language, no games, no goals, no tasks, no world, no consciousness. Now, if you're like me, you will experience something at once fascinating about this AI question that I've posed. How could we even think that these machines might have minds? But also at the same time, something depressing and boring about it. This particular fantasy that we are machines and that machines are somehow overwhelming us is not new. So I'd like to propose in my talk this evening to try to approach the issue from the side. I want to discuss a question about images and their nature in particular the idea of the relation of image and art, in order to shed light on image in relation to artificial intelligence. And then finally, say something about the importance of images in relation to what it is to be human. So I now turn to that, which is really my main topic. Now, although this is not marked in ordinary language, or, I believe, in the special usage of language of artists, art historians, scientists, philosophers, there's a distinction to be drawn between two fundamentally different kinds of image. And I think, to persuade you that this is right, I think that there's something astonishing, really remarkable, about the fact that the distinction I have in mind and that I'm about to explain to you has been neglected, even almost entirely overlooked. And I think this has also been the source of real confusion. So in order to mark the distinction, since it's not a distinction we regularly draw, I have to use language in a slightly different way. And so I will use two different English words. I will use the word image for one kind of image, and picture for another, or for the other. Now, I should say that this is sort of an amusing encounter with the very problem I'm interested in discussing. The actual English lecture that I gave, the actual English title that I gave my lecture for you this evening is Images and Pictures in Art and in Artificial Intelligence. And I chose this title in order to bring out very clearly three different things: images, pictures, art, and then artificial intelligence. But this intention was lost in the Spanish title, since both image and picture got translated as the same word. So we have la imagen en el arte y en la inteligencia artificial. Now, this is not a limitation of Spanish, but so far as I can tell, is pretty much the case in all the languages with which I'm familiar. In English, there are two words, picture and image, but in fact, they're used interchangeably. Which is just to say that the puzzle I want to share with you, or the distinction I want to make, is a conceptual one, a linguistic one. Okay, enough preamble. Images, as I propose to use this term, are natural phenomena. They are very common. Indeed, they are cheap. For example, there is an image of the sun in the surface of the pond, but also on the surface of the puddle, and also on the surface of the glass that sits in the middle of the puddle. Images are not made. They happen. We stumble upon them. Like the reflection on the pond's surface, images are sometimes visible. When an image is visible, we are afforded new opportunities for perception, for visual exploration. You can literally see the sky in the pond's surface, even though when we turn to the pond, we turn away from the sky. Images in this sense belong to the world. We see in them, we see through them, we see with them. Some philosophers and scientists have, I think, been misled by the fact that we can in this way explore the world through images, in that we only ever see images. Indeed, in certain segments of the philosophical world, it's common to hear people say things like, vision is learning about the world from images. I think this is a mistaken idea. To consider for a moment the case of the mirror. It is well known that actually it's a mark of cognitive sophistication even to be able to recognize oneself in the mirror. Dogs and cats reportedly can't do this. Dolphins, elephants, chimpanzees, people do this very well. In the case of people, maybe too well. We spend a lot of time in front of the mirror. And if you've ever tried to shave or apply makeup in front of a mirror, you know that it's an acquired skill. It's difficult to use what you see in a mirror to guide your, or driving is another good example. So I think it's important to acknowledge 2 points here. One is that understanding reflections is a bona fide way of expanding our visual powers, but also that seeing with reflections or mirrors is different from ordinary direct seeing, and that's a good thing because we want to hold on to the idea that when I look at you, I'm looking at your image, I'm looking at you. Now, I've mentioned mirrors. Mirrors might seem to prove my claim that images are found but not made. But a mirror, I think, should not be thought of as a device for making images, nor are mirror reflections artificial images. A mirror is just a shiny reflective surface. We contrive with mirrors to let images happen. Some images are visible, as I've been saying, but not all images are visible. I think the concept of an image is more general than that. We speak, for example, of the retinal image, and by this we mean the pattern of neural stimulation produced by light on the surface of the retina. There is an image of the immediate environment on the surface of the retina. It's a kind of point-for-point topographic isomorphism. Moreover, this image is causally necessary for normal vision. But this image is not itself visible. First of all, it's inside the eye, so it is hidden from view, both from the outside and from the inside. But even the ophthalmologist, who is actually able to look inside your eye and examine the surface of the retina, does not see an image there. Or rather, if he does, the reflection of his instruments. It's not the retinal image he's looking for. So that just is not the right of surface to reflect a visible image, but there is an image there. At the most general level, I think images are mappings or projections. There's a mathematical and physical science of the image, and we call that optics. Optics concern geometry of rays of light and the behavior of functions from domains onto codomains. Indeed, another name in mathematics, in English anyway, is precisely the image domain. So optics studies how images are formed and how they behave. So to summarize the first point, images are natural occurrences. They are mappings governed by both mathematical and physical principles. Some images are visible. Some images are causally efficacious, even not visible, like the retinal image. And there's probably an infinity of images that exist invisibly around us, that if we had the right instruments, we could determine their nature. And is the theory of all. So images, we may say, are optical phenomena par excellence. Okay, now I turn to the second sense, for which I will use exclusively the English word picture, and I've collaborated with the interpreter that she does the same. Pictures are something entirely different. They are not images that I've been explaining. Pictures, unlike images, are not naturally occurring phenomena. They are rather art. Whereas images are found, we stumble upon them. Pictures are made, produced, designed, built, constructed, fabricated. They are rendered, drafted, or executed. A picture, like a word, is a human act, or we may say it is the trace of human actions, the product of many decisions. Whereas images, at the most, projections or reflections, pictures are a technology. This has important consequences, many of which are familiar. As with all technologies, picture technology has a history. We invented picture techniques. We learned to make pictures. That is, to see them with comprehension, find them intelligently. That we need to learn to understand images too. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but I think it's important, and I think you'll see this as that what we learn when we learn to understand an image is different from what we learn when we learn to understand a picture. Pictures is, again, very familiar, especially to the artists and art historians in the room. Pictures have style, and so they have style histories. To encounter a picture is to encounter something that occupies, manifestly, a place in a range of styles. And every picture manifestly refers to that background of stylistic possibilities. It stands out. Pictures bear the marks of maker, time and place, as well as of interests, concerns, and values. There are no natural pictures. There are no style-free pictures. All images are natural. All images are style-free. A third point, which I've already gestured at, pictures are not merely products of human artifacts. They are tools. They are themselves instruments. We use pictures. What do we use pictures for? That's not an easy question to answer. The hypothesis that I want to share with you tonight is that at the most general level, a picture is a tool for showing. It's a tool for putting something on display. And whereas I can genuinely see something in an image, see the sky and the pond, with pictures, it's always rather a question of what someone is showing me, put on display for me. And this is related to a crucial point, which is that pictures, and we don't notice this because we take it for granted, pictures always function in the setting of communication. When someone shows me something in a picture, they're not just presenting me with the world, as it were, by way of an image, as, for example, they would be if they said, look. No, a picture is always an invitation to a specific something. Pictures curate. Pictures isolate. Pictures thematize. Pictures show. It is not an accident that in many, many contexts, pictures come with captions. The caption tells you what is in the picture. It tells you what you're supposed to be paying attention to. And even when there is no caption, suggest there is always an implicit caption. So you come to my house and you see the picture on the wall. This is my boyfriend. Or on my Instagram, this is the fabulous cocktail I had last night. So although pictures don't themselves speak, they operate in a rhetorical setting. It is in very case that in order to see a picture with comprehension, what it shows you, you need, in a sense, to already know what it's trying to show you. You need to already know what it is about. The 20th century philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein actually made a point in a very vivid way. He gave the example of how I can point to something, let's say a vase, in order to show you what it is, a vase, but with exactly the same gesture I could say, I can point to its color, or I can point to its size, or I could point to its shape, or I could point to the distinctive kind of vase it is as opposed to other kinds of vase. What secures the meaning of that gesture? What disambiguates it, and in normal life, it's perfectly disambiguated. What secures that meaning is the indicative context in which the demonstration occurs. Absent that context is only an empty gesture, And so I believe with pictures. They show what they show against the background of context. When you're confronted with a picture void of a clear communicative intention, a context, a rhetoric, a caption, then no matter how definite and precise in terms of line and form, such a picture shows nothing. It isn't really a picture at all, but a kind of pictorial misfire. So now, crucially, whereas images are dime a dozen, they are creatures of exchange and communication, and they have no life whatsoever without that broader context. I said that pictures are precious. I sometimes wonder, I think that's a question we might come back to. To summarize, pictures are natural with their own dedicated theory, optics. Pictures are cultural, historical, they are artifacts, and the history of pictures is the history of technology. And the history of technology, and this is important to appreciate, it will become important as I go on, social organization and control. Technology requires that we, that is to say, that we habituate it, that we master it. Technologies always demand that we learn to be creatures of the technology, that in some sense we're governed by it or even enslaved by it. So to learn technology is to come to embody the technology's demands. And pictures are that way. All right. Having now taken the time to convince you that there's a difference here, I want to just spend a moment showing that, in fact, in daily life, the distinction gets blurred. It gets blurred. I'm going to discuss two what I think of as very interesting. One is this. In the last several centuries, 400, 500, 600 years, we have learned ways of using images to make pictures out of them. Make pictures with or out of images. That's what a photographic camera is, or a digital camera. A camera is a mechanism harnessing the natural images for the purpose of making a picture. The camera itself is not a picture-making machine. It's not even an image-making machine, for, on my view, images are not made. It's a device for staging images so that we can work with them or play with them for the purpose of making a picture. But before there were cameras, and there's a very interesting history here that I think people in this room know. I leave it aside anyway, but I just want of picture making that involved working with images, such as artificial perspective. Artificial perspective, on my way of thinking about it, is applied optics. It puts the theory of the image to work in the manufacture of pictures. Specifically, it applies a method for figuring out possible or actual, that is to say, virtual images. For example, it's a procedure that actually lets you calculate relative shapes and sizes in a corresponding image imagined on a plane perpendicular to the line of sight. It is a manual or formal device for doing what we might also do with lenses. So the entanglement of pictures and images in today's world, and there are questions in that deserve attention. Just to mention a few. When a human drone pilot drives the machine to its target, are they relying on pictures or images to reach the target? When you watch your child's musical performance at school through the screen on your images of your kid, pictures of your kid, When graphemes are generated by generative AI, are these pictures or images? I'm not going to try to answer these questions, but I want to underscore that precisely what makes them interesting, what makes them difficult, is that there really is a difference between pictures, these tools, these instruments, these creations of ours, and images which belong to real physics. Now, I myself, as a writer, and a lot of my writing has been sort of purely philosophically, but I've spent a lot of time an audience of cognitive psychologists, perceptual psychologists. I myself have not been so clear about this distinction. And I want to just take a moment to reflect on that, because it will help me also some themes that are part of what makes this distinction interesting in the first place. In earlier writing, I used to criticize what I called the snapshot or picture conception of seeing. Specifically, I took aim at the idea that visual experience, that when I see you, it's like having a mental picture of you, a mental picture of all of this, in which all the detail is represented, sharp focus and uniform resolution from the center out to the periphery, in my mind. I still think that a problem. When now, you show up for me as present, but not as in here in a picture, but as out there. And you're all present in different ways. Some of you are deep in shadow over here on the right, whereas others are more brightly illuminated over here on my left, and some of you are background. The idea that it's a kind of rendering in my mind strikes me as a kind of fiction. But what I realize now is that I should have called this, I think, misguided way of thinking about what vision is, not as the misguided conception of seeing, but as the misguided image conception. For what I was criticizing was, in effect, the idea that seeing itself is an optical process. Somehow is to be the receiving end of images. I think there's very good reason to believe that vision is not an optical process. We don't see images, nor is vision confined to the kinds of projective that show up in images. If you define what is visible, and it sounds almost paradoxical, vision is not confined to visible. For example, we visually experience more than projects to the eyes. We experience the hidden parts of the things we see. You have a sense not just of the surfaces of things, you have a sense of their whole presence, and you have a sense not only of how things look, but you also have a sense in your visual consciousness of what they are. I see a person, just an image. I think we see more than would be available in a corresponding image. And it's also true that we see more frequently than is available in the image. Often distracted or uninterested or lazy. We go through life barely noticing half of what there is around us to see, or what might be recorded in an image. I don't see the keys that I'm looking for, even when they are right there on the table in front of me, and even though light from those keys has been reflected onto my retina. Another example, this audience of art, that we may fail entirely to see qualities of a painting, even though the painting is there in front of us, and we're scanning it with our eyes. It can take just as it does your keys on the table in front of you. Let me actually make an aside about this. As you know, it's sometimes possible to see underneath the surface of a painting by the use of X-ray, infrared, as well as other means of chemical analysis, something that I've been And this kind of technical work can allow for important discoveries and can play an interesting role in the preservation, restoration, and also understanding of. But it's also, I just want to emphasize, an obvious fact, a general feature of human perception that we find it difficult to see even what is entirely open to view, even what is not hidden. To bring what is there on the surface, to move from not seeing what is there to seeing it, or to seeing what is there to seeing it differently, can require effort, attention, and really the deployment of something that deserves to be thought of as aesthetic consciousness. And at least part of the value of art is precisely that it gives us the opportunity not just to move from not seeing to seeing, or from seeing to seeing differently, but to catch ourselves in the act of doing it, and watch how we accomplish the presence of the art object. But that's a digression. My main point right now is vision, I believe, is not optical, because seeing is not something that happens in the light eye system. It is something that the person or animal enacts or performs. To see something is to take interest in it. And so it is, and this is key, to enter into relationship with it. To orient oneself to it, or in response to it, it is to turn oneself with it. As perceivers, we don't present or reflect the world inside as we would if vision were just a matter of the occurrence of images in the head. Rather, we reach toward it, we hold it, sometimes we caress the visual presence of something and to sustain a relationship with it. Then is that although the image conception of seeing, which we have sort of static like representations in our mind, is really a mistake, the picture of seeing, in a way, is profoundly pictorial about seeing. And for two reasons. First, making a picture of something, photographing it or drawing it, it doesn't matter, painting it. In fact, for my purposes, sculpting it would be just as much an example of this. Making a picture of something is an exercise in the work of seeing it. To make a picture of something is to engage it. It is to achieve intimacy with it. The picture is precisely a expression or manifestation of this encounter. This is obviously true when we think of drawing or painting. Designers practically themselves over the object. Also true even with the cell phone. We photograph things in part because we use, and now I'm talking accessibility of the cell phone, we things in part because we use picture making to organize our attention. We avoid looking by making pictures. It's that picture making is a special way of focusing on what we see, and so what we see. And so maybe that's why the parents stare at the screens of their cameras while they're witnessing their children's live performances. It's a way of concentrating on picture. It then raises, I think, is relevant to the question of the Prado's ban on picture taking. To make a picture is to concern oneself with it in a remarkably intimate way. This is why we find ourselves so often compelled to photograph that plate of food, or that friend, or that lover. That's the way that. Now there's a second sense in which I think seeing is interestingly pictorial. Pictures influence the way you see. Up on certain ways of reflecting on visuality. Art historian Hollander put it like this: the picture gives the standard by which awareness is assessed. And this is why Whitney, reworking of Wolflin, can write the sense in itself art history. All right. Now, Plato, in his attack on art in the Republic, it's easy to make pictures of anything. You just hold up a mirror. That's all there is to making a picture. Art is no more than this sort of play with images. Plato was mistaken, I think, and 3 times, at least if we take his argument at value. Images are not pictures, as I've been arguing. Pictures are actually very difficult. Even with the cell phone, making good pictures is extremely difficult. Artist, even the pictorial art, is not that of making pictures. And that's the point I turn to now. So now, what makes some pictures, not all, work? Not to pictures as such, but artworks. What is it really that makes some pictures but not others? Now here I think the discussion earlier about pictures of technology and the role that technology has in our lives is crucial. I stressed before that pictures are technology. Both the making and using of pictures in whatever medium is a culturally embedded, settled, communicative activity. And it actually has been so, we know. Fluent with transactions. Think of the pictures of cars or on the shelf. Not to mention the super of pictures streaming on social media. These pictures or implicit captions, their meaning and content, what they show, is secured, usually by these captions. We seldom need to think twice. There's never any need to think twice to seeing what these pictures show. This is a remarkable fact. We forget how remarkable this is. Something so historical and manufactured, so specific and natural, has for us the quality of self-evidence and naturalness. It's explained ultimately by the fact not only that pictures have been engineered for us, but that themselves have been organized for pictures through habit and through custom. I think there's really, we're trained for pictoriality just the way we're trained for literacy. Now, none of this applies to art. Pictures are entirely different. The art picture says no, or rather it says pause. Art pictures refuse transparency, they refuse intimacy, they refuse self-evidence. They resist being labeled. They present themselves always as questions rather than as self-evidences. Habit and mastery of the background don't suffice to let you know work, or to let you know what it is, or know what would count somehow as it's being a successful or unsuccessful version of what it is. It's not cited an artwork. No caption can suffice to tell you what the art really is. Picture, and this is positive, is always a potential. It's always a problem for us. It stops us short and defies us. art pictures resemble pictures in the world, unlike ordinary pictures. They refuse to participate in the domestic economy of picture making. They elide the background and methods of captioning that make pictures pictures. The picture, in a way, is always a stranger, a strange picture. Instead of showing us something, it confronts us with all that we take for granted in our normal exchange of pictures. Artworks disrupt habitual patterns of organization that make pictoriality possible. And so art pictures both disorganize and miraculously. Art pictures are not illustrations, mere acts as pictures are, rather liberators. The artwork resists just being seen in the habitual way. And so it demands of you that you change yourself so that you may, as it were, invent or devise or come up with it yourself originally. Engagement with the art is an anti-technological act. It is a resistance to the way that ordinary pictorial technology would govern you. Technology before is always a system of control. Your engagement with an artwork is always an act of and creation. So we come to a beautiful paradox now. Pictures. Not pictures in the traditional sense. They are anti-pictures, or strange tools. They're pictures that are divorced from the kinds of contexts that alone could give them self-evident apparent, that alone would let them function, the pictures function as pictures. At the same time, right in fact, artwork pictures everything. Only because we are organized by pictures, it's only because we are pictorial creatures living in the pictorial world that making art pictures that can liberate us from all that even has any point. Because pictures hold us captive, in ways that technology always does, that gives art pictures their raison d'être. Art is about life, as if, although that is sometimes the case. I mean something subtler. Art life, all the systems and ways in which we're organized, matter as its raw material. We make art out of pictures just as we make picture images. Remarkably, making art really and remaking ourselves again and again. Art and life are entangled, and finally, we beings are products of our own making. And take shape again and again and again in new ways to entanglement and resistance. Now, having spent the last 2 weeks here in the Prado, visiting with painters in the galleries, spending many hours fruitfully talking with curators and scholars and conservators here in the museum, I'm very well aware that there is so much more than one could say about the art in artworks in this building than I have said. My form that art pictures distort the backgrounds that make ordinary pictures possible, and that they both disclose us to ourselves and also at the same time give us resources to understand ourselves, and also give us resources that we may change. This is intended, this formula, to be very general, very high altitude, and thus very far removed from the work of any individual artist working individually at any particular time. It's also intended to be, as I think of it, vertical. That I focus not on art's endless conversation with other art, but rather with art conversation with life. So I don't pretend for a minute this characterization here is exhaustive or purpose, but it does something that is art's basic work. Art liberates us by disorganizing us in the face of the world's organization of us. And crucially, it is this key feature of art that we need to understand to appreciate why, in fact, AI cannot participate in the process. So let us turn our attention to the final part of the talk, the shortest part of the talk. Let us turn our attention back to the question of AI. John Dewey, the mid-20th philosopher, wrote these words: "By one of the ironic perversities that so often attend affairs, the existence of the works of art theory depends has become an obstruction to theory about them." I'm going to read that twice because it's a very complicated thought. By one of the perversities that so often affairs, the existence of the works of art upon which the formation of an aesthetic theory depends, an obstruction to theory about them. His point is very straightforward. With art, not about the thing. It's not about the object, it's about the experience. Or rather, for he had no simple or reductive notion of what an experience is. It's about the work we do with the art and the ways it occasions precisely to engage it fully, and engaging it, and doing so gives us opportunities to grow, to change, to respond. That's what art names. Art's medium is our very humanness. Pushing paint around canvas. But the painter is really around. Painter's true medium is, more particularly, the way put together and the activity of our own makers. So framed this way, I hope we can begin to understand first not only why there is no place for computers, large language models, whatever, in our lives with art, but why the very idea that computers might themselves one day make reflects a profound shortness or misunderstanding about what art is and what it tells us about ourselves. So as for the first point, a computer can no more make a work of art than it can scratch an itch. Not because it can't direct an arm to the right location, but it has no itches. It has no needs, cravings, and so finally no motive. Life, our lives, but I think all of life, exists in a space of care and motive. And crucially, we make art to the conditions in which we find ourselves. Computers don't have conditions they need to cope with. Everything I've said here leaves entirely open what is about also we, on the ground of our itches, our needs, our motives, make our. And even when the computers seem to be quasi-agents, generating texts or graphical instructions which are materially identical that we have generated, created stories, for they are always our stories, our pictures, our art. Them. We initiate them. We appreciate it. Concerns. It can only ever be our concerns that animate them. If the computer can roll at all, it is merely that tool with which we can scratch our own itches. Learn and change our own selves. But as to the point, it also begins to be clear, I think, that the process of AI, as I said earlier, has taken for granted an impoverished conception of the person. What is distinctive of us is not that we talk, play games, make us perceive, but rather how mentally we struggle through all that. The human chess player does not merely execute moves in light of a knowledge of the strategy, history, tactics, whatever, of the game. The human chess player struggles to play, struggles to concentrate in the face of competitive pressures and anxiety produced by the of play. For the human game is a site of conflict. It's a site of work. It's a site of actualization. It's a site of action. It's a testing ground. I think this is really a general fact. Take the case of language very briefly. We don't just talk, blindly following rules. Talking is always an issue for us. Rules, such as they are up for grabs and in dispute. We always, inevitably and from the beginning, are made to cope with how hard talking is, how liable we are to misunderstand each other. Although most of the time this is taken matter of fact, without due stress. Almost inevitably is to question word choice, to demand repetition and repair. What did you mean? How can you say that? In this way, within it, from the very start, and as one of its basic modes, the activities of criticism and reflection about talking, which end up changing the way we talk. We don't just mindlessly go with this. And in place, we know striving, argument, negotiation. We change language in using language. That's what a language is, a place of capture and release, and criticism, a process, negotiation, accommodation, and innovation. We figure out mere doing, skillfulness, habit, from how these doings, engagements, and skills through our very acts of doing them or even resisting doing them. So if we keep language, we lose sight of what I'm calling the entanglement that is tangled up, being required to how hard it is to carry on. Then a discussion presupposed a sort of one-sided peaches and cream simplification and cognitive, as if speaking were just the application of rules, just putting sentences together that make sense in an appropriate way. But to imagine users who are not also actively, maybe even anxiously, struggling with, and so in a sense, something which is at best a kind of shell of language, which is what machine language is. It's the shell of language. Language, in a way, and these are just my very last sentences, language is like ants. It is hot, undertaken by under the felt pressure of their needs, desires, and offerings. With language we make, we go We pray, we hug, we love, we fight, we dominate. Language is interwoven with every form. Now, computers, I believe, talk the way they dance, which is to say they don't. No computer, not only because no computer has anything, but because no computer, when it produces, for the right. And computers make art, they speak, which is to say they don't. Computers cannot and will not participate in the fruitful entanglement of art and life. And that's even if, as is surely the case, computers end up playing in the production, consumption, and transmission of art. Art things as problems. They are problems for the art, and they are problems for us. Thank you very much. Thank you.